The Chinese Uyghur population resides predominantly in the province of Xinjiang. The Uyghur people in this province are primarily of Sunni Muslim denomination. Uyghurs are a Turkic-speaking ethnic minority recorded to have been residing in Central and Southeast Asia since the 8th century, and they're historically a sedentary agriculture-based group, but in modern times, many hold worker positions in Chinese mining and petroleum industries. The Chinese government is perpetrating an ongoing series of human rights abuses against Uyghurs and other religious and ethnic minorities in the northwestern region of Xinjiang. Under the administration of Xi Jinping, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP for short, has established over 85 identified camps. These are state-defined re-education camps, where at least 1 million Uyghurs have been interned. There's evidence of Uyghurs being separated from their families and subjected to forced labor, mass rape, sexual abuse, and mass sterilizations. Several countries have outwardly accused China of committing genocide, including the United States, Canada, and the Netherlands, as stated by the United Nations Genocide Convention of 1948. However, China continues to deny any and all allegations of human rights violations and genocide. The Chinese government claims that the camps are reportedly counter-extremism centers established in an effort to prevent terrorism and root out Islamist extremism. Tensions between the Uyghur Muslim group in China and the Xinjiang citizens was prevalent beginning in the 1990s, but mostly worsened after 9/11 in 2001. The Xinjiang government used 9/11's global war on terrorism as justification for their discrimination toward Uyghurs. The government vowed to eradicate religious extremism, separatism, and international terrorism at all costs. This tension escalated to violence in 2009 when an Uyghur protest broke out in the Xinjiang capital against economic and cultural discrimination. State-sanctioned Han Chinese migration to the area marginalized and forced Uyghurs to work in factories, while the Han disproportionately enjoyed the economic benefits of the resources and developments of coal and natural gas in Xinjiang. Over 200 people were killed during this protest, and this acted as a turning point in the beliefs and attitudes that Xinjiang citizens had against the Uyghurs. Citizens began to blame Uyghurs for random violent acts that occurred throughout the city, claiming that the Uyghurs all had the potential to become terrorists. Repression of the Uyghurs really began in 2014 when President Xi Jinping warned of the toxicity of religious extremism in Xinjiang and hinted towards using tools of dictatorship to eliminate Islamist extremism. In 2017, the official recognition of training centers was created when the Xinjiang government passed an anti-extremism law that justified placing Uyghurs in these camps to eliminate extremism. These centers taught the Uyghurs Mandarin, Chinese law, and atheist values to prevent extreme religious ideas. This law also prohibited people from growing long beards and wearing veils in public. These acts of repression against the Uyghur Muslims have all contributed to the potentiality of a genocide occurring against them. Now let's walk through the 10 stages of genocide and how they apply to this particular situation. Classification is the first step of the 10 stages of genocide. In this step, there's an emergence of an us versus them mindset that's typically based on ethnicity, race, religion, or nationality. In order to prevent the progression of genocide through this step, it's important to ensure that there's diversity in terms of ideas, beliefs, and groups. This step is directly exemplified in the Uyghur Genocide through two means: distinguishing between the majority, the Han Chinese, and the minorities, the Tibetans and Uyghurs. This creates a social structure that excludes the Uyghurs. Another example is through the classification of Uyghurs as separatists and terrorists based on the history of attempts to gain independence from China in their home region, Xinjiang. As a result, they're viewed as a dangerous threat to the well-being of China. Symbolization is the second step of the 10 stages. In this step, there's classification or otherization of a particular group. There are derogatory labels or drawings which become associated with a certain group. These can include clothing, body modifying, or anything similar. As a Muslim majority group, the Uyghurs are subject to a lot of symbolization. China has put bans on long beards, wearing headscarves in public, as well as fasting during Ramadan. These are all symbolic of the Muslim faith, and it's evident that the Chinese government's actions have helped further push the Uyghur genocide as something acceptable in China, when clearly it's not. This dehumanization of the Uyghur Muslim group must come to an end if there's any hope of the genocide ever ending. It's truly sad to see this occurring. But for now, let's move on to the third step. Discrimination. Discrimination is based around a more institutionalized form of restrictions against a particular group. During this stage, one can typically see laws and customs that are used to deny the rights or even the citizenship of a group due to their nationality, ethnicity, race, or religion that they may be associated with. This can be especially restrictive and oppressive due to the fact that the victim group will usually have no legal protections from this discrimination. Because of the lack of protection, victims are more likely to become the subjects of severe crimes. In the case of the Uyghur Muslims in China, they have been discriminated against by the Chinese government in several ways. For instance, Uyghur Muslims have been limited in their ability to freely practice their religion, travel, and there have been restrictions on their reproduction. While discrimination is never ideal, the institutionalization of discrimination further supports this otherization of the Uyghurs. With the implementation of discriminatory laws and customs, the fourth step, dehumanization, quickly becomes apparent. During this step, targeted groups are compared to animals, vermin, insects, or even diseases, anything in order to vilify them. These hateful generalizations can easily lead to the path of dehumanization, which could overcome the human revulsion against murder. Typically, dehumanization is backed by hateful propaganda. This propaganda often portrays the victim group in a derogatory light, and the victims are usually victims of name-calling. While this portrayal of Muslims is not exclusive to China, the framing of Muslims in state media significantly contributes to the negative perception of them. Additionally, while this aspect can also be tied into the step of discrimination, prohibitions on Islamic education can further dehumanize Muslims due to the message it sends. By putting restrictions on Islamic education, there's a negative connotation with the practices and beliefs that they have. This negative perception of Islamic beliefs can transition into a negative perception of the people associated with those beliefs. In the fifth step, organization, we see the development of organized and structured discrimination of a group. At this point, discrimination is either formally organized by the state or informally organized by an outside group. The key indicator of this step would be the emergence of armed and trained militia units. One of the key evidences that the organizational step has been surpassed by China includes the development of several anti-terror campaigns by paramilitary forces since 2015. While justified as actions against terrorists, these campaigns only occurred in areas that were densely populated with Muslims such as the Uyghurs. While the prevention of a genocide step is ideal, preventing the organization of discrimination by China was particularly difficult since they are a world leader of arms exports. Polarization, the sixth stage, sees extremists beginning to deepen the divide between groups previously established. Moderate voices from within the perpetrator's own faction are targeted. Hate speech is broadcasted, and intermarriage or other forms of social interaction between groups is prohibited. Evidence of polarization by Chinese authorities is how the CCP silences opposing voices and disallows Uyghurs from integrating as full Chinese citizens, and prevention is made difficult due to Chinese influence in major American corporations like Nike and the NBA. In the preparation stage of genocide, the perpetrator group leaders plan out the final solution to be executed on the targeted group. With regards to the Uyghur Genocide, the Uyghurs were often associated with terrorists, where genocidal attempts were masked under anti-terror attacks and campaigns. The victims were deported to labor camps and being treated poorly. The preparation stage is the last stage to prevent mass killing. In the case of preventing Uyghur genocide, approaches such as arms embargo and global intervention and acknowledgement must be considered. The persecution stage is where victims are identified and separated out because of their ethnic or religious identity. They might be forced to wear identifying symbols, their property can be expropriated, they can be segregated into ghettos, deported into concentration camps, or strategically starved. Anything to destroy the victim group. In this case, Uyghurs are barred from growing long beards and wearing veils in public, forced to learn Mandarin, and made to renounce their religious beliefs. But more importantly, they're being thrown into internment camps, or at best, to work for nearly nothing in deplorable conditions at factories. At this stage, a genocide emergency must be declared, and, if possible, armed international intervention or assistance to the victim group for self-defense should be prepared, along with humanitarian assistance and private relief groups for the refugees. Extermination, the ninth stage of genocide, is commonly defined as the mass killing of the targeted group. This stage has been legally associated with the term genocide, and it's where trained armed forces work with militias to begin exterminating their victims under sponsorship of the state. Rapid and overwhelming armed intervention, as well as international protection, are vital to the process of preventing extermination from taking place. In addition, it is necessary to establish real safe areas and refugee escape corridors for the purpose of preventing extermination. Dr. Erkin Siddiq, an Uyghur American, is the president of the Uyghur Projects Foundation and senior advisor to the World Uyghur Congress. He states, "The Uyghur people have disappeared. Death is everywhere right now." Although the actual number of victims that have been exterminated remains unclear at the moment, it's evident that immediate action must be taken to stop the Uyghur genocide from progressing further before it's too late. As a matter of fact, Dr. Erkin Siddiq claims that the total number of Uyghur detainees in camps in China and those presumed dead now exceeds the total number of Jews detained and killed during the Holocaust of World War II. The 10th and final stage of genocide is denial, which always follows a genocide, regardless of the circumstances. This stage occurs when the perpetrators or instigators of a particular genocide deny having committed any crimes or atrocities, and instead place unwarranted blame on the victims to draw global attention elsewhere. In order to prevent denial from taking place, the perpetrators must be punished by an international tribunal or by national courts. In the case of the Uyghur genocide currently taking place in China, it has been reported that Chinese government officials are taking deliberate and extreme measures to hide any traces of the disappeared Uyghur race. According to an article published on Byline Times, Chinese government officials have decided to use chemicals to decompose bodies rather than using mass graves. In addition, their goal is to destroy all physical and digital evidence of victims' identities, and even the computers in which that data is stored. China has certainly proved the denial stage of genocide to be true. The Chinese government has condemned all the allegations against them, saying all reports that they have detained Uyghurs is completely untrue. The retention of Uyghurs in concentration camps has been justified by the government in terms of counterterrorism and national security of the people. The Chinese government insists that the Uyghur militants are waging a violent campaign for an independent state by plotting bombings, sabotage, and civic unrest, but it is accused of exaggerating the threat in order to justify the repression of the Uyghurs. China at first denied the existence of these camps, but after images of camp construction with watchtowers and barbed wire fences emerged, the government launched a propaganda campaign portraying the camps as humane job training centers. They say the crackdown is necessary to prevent this terrorism and root out Islamist extremism, and that these camps are an effective tool for re-educating inmates in the fight against terrorism. The global response to the Uyghur genocide has been mixed. In a July letter to the UN Human Rights Council, 22 countries, mainly European, excluding the US, responded to disturbing reports of large-scale arbitrary detentions of Uyghurs by condemning Chinese leadership. Then, 4 days later, 37 countries defended China's remarkable achievements in the field of human rights by protecting their country from terrorism, separatism, and religious extremism. The list of countries that agreed included the Muslim-majority countries Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Qatar. Later, the U.S. condemned China on the global stage at the UN General Assembly, with more than 30 other countries calling the camps a horrific campaign of repression. There are also claims of China trying to reduce the Uyghur population through mass sterilizations, but China has dismissed these claims as baseless. The Xinjiang government argues instead that the Uyghur population has been growing continuously during the past decade, and that reports describing a surge in the number of sterilizations performed in the region, from fewer than 50 per 100,000 people in 2016 to almost 250 per 100,000 people in 2018, were not in line with the real situation in Xinjiang. There has even been a musical proving China's denial of this genocide. Xinjiang is a predominantly Muslim region in West China, but the musical The Wings of Songs that was released in April 2021 depicts Xinjiang with no Islamic culture, yet it retains stereotypes about Uyghur culture. The young Uyghur men are clean-shaven and seen chugging beers, and the women are seen without traditional headscarves. This is not the true culture of the Uyghur Muslims at all. This is the vision the Chinese Communist Party wants to portray to audiences at home and abroad, that Uyghur Muslims are singing and dancing happily, not oppressed at all. The lie that the Chinese government continues to follow is the lie of the century. They have repeatedly defended their actions in Xinjiang by reporting citizens now enjoy a high standard of life, but throughout this video, we have learned that the Uyghurs are being killed simply because of their culture, and something must be done to stop it.